All right. Well, welcome everyone. I am so delighted to have Kimberly Coyle here with us today on the Writer's Block. We've talked a couple times over Voxer, but this is our first time seeing each other face to face. So it's really nice to meet you kind of officially
Yes, thank you.
today here, Kimberly. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Well, and I was also telling her before we hit record that this is new for us in terms of topic wise, and I'm really glad when I reached out to her. She has a lot of writing experience to share with us and could draw from a lot of things, but we kind of landed on this whole idea of freelancing and kind of using freelancing as a tool to help us improve our craft as writers. But before we launch into all of that, I'd just like to give you an opportunity, Kimberly, to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, kind of in your relationship with writing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm Kimberly Coyle. I am a writer and a writing instructor, and I live in New Jersey. I have been teaching writing as an adjunct professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is a university near me in New Jersey. I've been doing that for this is, I think, my 8th year. And I've taught a number of classes there, but currently this semester I'm going to be teaching creative nonfiction, the art of the personal essay. So I'm really excited. It's a new to me class, so I'll be teaching that. But I got my start really as a writer. I've been writing online for, I think it's about 16 years now. So I started out, as many of us have, I think, as a blogger, like way, way, way back in the
Yeah.
day when blogging was the big thing. Um, and yeah, I started doing that. And then over time, I began to realize like this feels vocational to me. I feel like this is actually the direction I want to take with my life. Previously, I had studied to be a nurse, and that did not last very long. So I
Mm,
I
very
took
different
1 year
line of
off.
work.
Yeah, I took a sharp left um, to do writing, and so as I started to begin to see, like, no, this feels vocational. I feel like this is what I want to do with my life. I started to pitch book ideas, and I landed a literary agent. And I went to school and got my master's. I got an MFA in creative writing, which is what led me to start teaching because you can teach when you have an MFA. So that was also kind of another turn that my career took that I had not anticipated at all. So I did that for a while, and I was like really focused on being potentially working towards being an author of books. And that eventually just ended up fizzling out. And so in the middle of that, I had started to do some freelance writing. Um, and so I realized, well, it looks like the book thing is not going to happen now, right now. Maybe that's something in the future. Um, and why don't I turn my attention to freelance writing? So I began to do some freelance work, and that ended up just being really, really fulfilling work. I really enjoyed it, and I'm still freelancing, not as often as I'd like, because I'm also teaching and tutoring, but I'm still doing that work, and it has taken my freelance work has taken quite a some twists and turns as well. So I've done freelancing as just writing articles for publications where I pitch my work and then have gotten articles that way. I did some copywriting and some content writing for an organization, so that was a different version of freelance writing that was new to me for a while. Um, and then I've of course have continued to write for myself. So I just in the past, I don't know, maybe 6 months, I started writing on Substack. I switched from blogging, which eventually led to a website, which eventually led to Substack. I feel like we're just kind of going in a circle here, but I'm
All of the
currently on
ways we need to
Substack.
put our work out, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I know that is a very long bio, but my point in all of that is not to say so much about what I've done, but to show our fellow writers like what is possible, that there are so many paths as a writer, and freelancing is one of them that has been very fruitful and beneficial for me.
Yeah, I appreciated that, and I was hearing that as you were telling the story because I think so many writers feel that writing has to lead towards this final destination of being a published author. And it sounded like you went that way initially, and twists and turns happened, and that kind of got shelved or put away for the time being. And yet you found this fulfillment in doing some freelance work. So maybe it would be helpful to kind of define terms a little bit for our listeners. When you say freelance, are you referring mostly to writing for pay, or are you writing in some other context in which you're offering your words to someone else, for example?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. At this point for me, yes, I would define freelancing as writing for payment for another individual or an organization or a publication. So there, when I first started out freelancing, and this was way truly many years ago, when I was still blogging, there were a lot of really small, wonderful publications online. This was before social media really took over, so there were a lot more smaller places where you could um, place your work, but often they didn't pay. And that was a great place to start out for me. It was wonderful. Sometimes I would just write for other people's blog. If they asked me, I would have a couple friends I knew online who would go on vacation, and they'd say, I need to fill in guest blog post. Can you do that? And then there were other smaller publications that I had written for that no longer exist because social media kind of has, I think, taken away from a lot of that that kind of online work. So initially for me, it was not paid. However, as I began to see it more as like, no, this is my job, and I have once I got enough experience behind me where I felt like, no, I need to be paid for this. This is work that I am, taking time out of my day, and my skill set and everything I've learned over the years as a writer, like this is worthy of pay. So for me, then it really did become like, I will write if I'm being paid to write. Otherwise, I'm writing for myself, and that's great too. But
Yeah,
I'd rather be paid.
yeah, definitely. And there is a place for both of those things,
Mhm.
to build your own writing platform, which is obviously usually not for pay, but just a heart gift of our words. But then also, it's so great that you can kind of develop in your craft by writing for others. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the craft side of this, because I know for a lot of writers that I've spoken to, um, they want to get started writing, but they don't even really know how, or um, they're insecure about their skill set, and they want to get more practice. Do you think that this kind of freelance writing is a good option for writers who want to get better at the craft? And if they feel a little insecure about their writing skills, is it possible to start writing freelance?
Another great question. I think that is absolutely what would come to mind for me as a newer freelance writer, or someone who's, looking at that. Yeah, I absolutely think it is possible as a newer writer, maybe someone who's only written online or via emails or something like that for yourself and your personal readership. If you want to grow as a writer, freelancing is an excellent way to do that. And I mean specifically to craft. It is an excellent way to grow in your craft because, for one thing, lots of times publications are more interested in your ideas than they are in the execution of those ideas. They will help you with the execution. They will help you get the piece to a place where it is worthy of their readership. Now, it still needs to be your best work. It still needs to be really good work, but they're really interested in new, fresh, interesting takes, interesting ideas that are through your lens that maybe haven't been expressed in the way that you're able to express them. So I would say to writers who are feeling unsure, insecure, not sure if they're ready, to just give it a shot, just try, just, dip your toes in the water of freelancing. Maybe don't aim for the New York Times immediately, but you could certainly start small and work your way up. And that is really what I suggest. And that's what I've done personally. Like I said, I just started out doing guest posts on other people's blogs, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful way to begin practicing your craft for a different audience. So there's a couple things I think of when I think of growing in your craft in terms of freelancing. And the first is that you're going to be writing for a different audience every time, depending on what you're doing. So if you've been able to pitch an idea to, let's say, three different ideas to three different publications. Well, each of those publications, let's say all three of them are online magazines or something like that. Each of those is going to have a different viewpoint that they come from. They're going to have a different audience. They're going to have different values. They're going to have different things that they find, the different ways that they want ideas expressed. And so that is such a wonderful way to grow in our craft, in that if you're writing those three separate pieces, then you're going to have to really work on, who am I writing to here? What is important to them? What does this particular audience of readers need to know? And how will they receive this information best? And that's a great way to grow in craft. So that's one aspect of that. And the other is that for a lot of publications, as you start to get into, more like paid publications, and even some unpaid, they have editors who are going to help you. And the constructive criticism I have received from editors has been the number one factor in my improving as a writer. Truly.
Yes.
I mean, it's so, so critical to have a set of eyes on your work who truly will give you unbiased feedback. It's helpful if it's another writer friend, or like in a group like this, if you're sharing work and you have like a small group that you're able to share work with, that's awesome. That's also needed. But to have a truly skilled editorial eye on your work, there's nothing like it. I truly can't think of another way to grow, other than like when I went to school for my master's of fine arts, in writing. Obviously, our work was being critiqued all the time, but it was being critiqued often by fellow students. So while some of that feedback was great, I love having an editor who is skilled, who's been in the business for a long time, who really can come at it from a different viewpoint than a fellow reader.
Mm.
It's just so, so helpful in growing in the craft.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like I've learned more from other eyes on my work that have helped me improve in my craft than I could have if I had an English degree of some sort, which I don't have. A lot of us don't have MFAs, but having some other set of eyes that can look at your work critically is really helpful. And I had my start doing freelance copywriting work, and so I was also doing a lot of what you described. And what I have found, especially at the very beginning when I was really insecure about my abilities as a writer, usually the companies and the entrepreneurs that are hiring you because they don't like to write. And they don't really maybe don't even have the time or the skill to do it. And so I found it to be kind of a gentle entry into writing, especially if you find the right kind of clients to work with. Not everyone is so easily pleased, but it does help to cut your teeth on writing for other people, because usually they don't want to write. So anything you offer is probably better than what they have. And as you more and more practice, you get better at it yourself. So I find that's a good benefit of starting out in the freelance world too, is that you're usually providing a service that other people don't want to do. And so just the fact that you want to do it and you want to be good at it, you're already a leg up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, particularly to the copywriting, that sort of world, because that is a huge part of freelancing for a lot of writers. That's their bread and butter. That's where they make their money, is doing copywriting. And I did that for maybe 2 years. Actually, I had been hired by an organization to work as a content writer rather.
Mm-hmm.
And then they transitioned me into copywriting, which is more marketing work. Like if you're, if we have any writers who aren't super familiar with that, it's more like marketing and advertising and like helping write, emails that go out and things like that, and ad copy. So that was a completely new skill set for me. And I literally had done none of that work, like none of it. So this should give folks a lot of hope. Like you can start out at zero. And so I was fortunate enough that the editor who I worked with there, she was really well versed in copywriting. And so she gave me phenomenal feedback. And so that was really how I learned how to do it. I did that. And then I tried to, learn some stuff online, but, it was incredibly helpful to have her there to give me that feedback. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there was no one else there who wanted to write it. It was me. So,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
and I didn't always want to write it either, but I got paid to do it. So that was amazing. And now I
That's a
have
bonus.
a skill set. Yeah. Now I have a different
Yeah.
skill set that I wouldn't have had previously. So
Yeah. That's great. Well, speaking of like the beginnings, the beginnings of anything new are unknown and kind of scary. If you were talking to somebody or somebody's listening to this podcast and you're wanting to give advice how to get started freelancing, like where would you advise them to start? And even like that whole element of doing it for pay, maybe starting with friends, but how do you move to that next level of finding freelancing work that actually helps pay the bills?
yeah. Well, there's a couple things I would suggest. The first would be to begin with the publications that you read. So, if as a reader, you already know what the audience is, you are the audience, you know what they're looking for, you know the type of things that they publish. Um, I think that's a really great place to begin looking. So, the publications that you're reading online, um, is it possible that you have an idea that would fit in with that audience? And if it is, then great, give it a shot. Throw out your idea. Maybe you have an idea for an article that, you read an article in one of their online magazines or their blog or what have you, and you have a counter argument for it, or you have a different viewpoint on it. That would be a great place to start. Because you're already familiar with it. You already know what they're looking for and the types of things that they publish. So that's one place to begin. There are lots and lots of groups online, especially on Facebook. So I think if you do some kind of deep dives on Facebook or on just Googling different freelance groups for writers, where you can go in and lots of times I'm in a couple, I don't remember the names offhand, so I'm sorry, I can't help you there. But there are a couple of Facebook groups that I'm in for freelance writers who they have a lot of editors in there as well, and they post when they're looking for
Mm,
freelancers. So they
that's
are
a good
always
tip.
posting jobs, they're always posting opportunities in there. So that's a really good one. And I think, if you do enough of a deep dive Googling, you can certainly find some of those things. There are also a lot of email lists that you can get on. So I get a number of emails from various services that, I think one is called Freelance Opportunities. I can't remember if I have to pay for it or not. If I do, it's a very nominal fee, but maybe, I don't know, $5 a month or something. And they send opportunities they scour the internet. They scour, wherever editors are hanging out, which I hear is often on Twitter. I don't hang out there myself. So, but that is a place you can go to find freelance, editors putting out a pitch call and saying, this is what I'm looking for. But I get this email from Freelance Opportunities, and they scour the internet for me, and they send all of the opportunities that, the pitch calls, they call it, that an editor would put out and say, hey, we're looking for articles on XYZ. Send your pitches to whomever it is. So there's things like that. So those are places that you can look as well. It can be helpful too to start kind of narrowing down for yourself, like if you have an area of expertise. So if there, or an area of interest. So like for myself, if I had kind of continued to pursue being in the medical field, I would have been able to do medical writing most likely, because that would be my background. That would be something I have a lot of experience in. And then as a writer, I could write about, whatever, nursing today. I didn't stay in that field, so I'm not able to do that. But a lot of us come to writing as a second career or as a side hobby that becomes more important. And, and most of us have a lot of life experience. So I would draw on whatever life experience you have, and begin looking for places that might need writing around your niche, your particular area of expertise. I think that can be important, and helpful. And then, there is simply just getting on the internet and starting to search for opportunities and look
Yeah.
at places that and like. You may not be a reader at a particular place, but of it, of this particular publication. You could do that. And then in terms of like if you were looking particularly like for freelance work as a copywriter or content writer or something along those lines, or even ghostwriting, that's another form of freelance writing, which I've never tried, but a lot of people do that work. I think, frankly, it really comes down to just being able to search well or find some email lists that are doing that for you. And there are so many out there. But like I said, freelance opportunities, you could just Google and that would be
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Those are some really good tips. I really like, and that was kind of a new idea to me about the Facebook groups, because you can find, I have actually benefited from that. I have seen some job opportunities pop up, and sometimes it's the early bird gets the worm kind of
Yeah,
situation where you kind of need to
absolutely.
stay on top of those things and be vocal in those groups and stand out, because sometimes there can be a lot of competition for those opportunities. But especially when you're talking about pitching articles and things like that, that's a really great idea too. And hanging out at Twitter, I don't do that for that purpose. So yeah, I think that would take a little bit of practicing. I've also heard that LinkedIn is a way to do that as well.
Yeah.
That you can get involved with some groups, follow the right people in those realms, and find out opportunities that are there. So those
Yeah.
are some good tips. So, and you mentioned too the whole idea of kind of thinking about your own background and your own expertise. Um, what are your so when I first started, I was like, I don't know what I'm an expert in. I think at first sometimes we lack the confidence to get started. And funny story is, one of my very first clients, I was doing a little bit different work than what you described, which was copywriting. But my first client was actually a cigar company, which is hilarious because I
Mhm.
don't know anything about cigars, but I learned. I
Yeah.
learned quite a bit.
Mhm.
And, so I think that some of those things are like right place, right time, but also just having a willingness to learn and to get involved in something that may not necessarily be like natural for you, but if you have a willingness to learn and to show up and do good work, that can pay off sometimes.
Absolutely. I totally agree. In fact, that I had written down a couple things, prior just so I could remember. And I wrote down, try new things, try new ideas, try new publications, try to pitch above your head, try to pitch places that you think, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, but I think I'm going to try it anyway.
Shoot
I
for the stars. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great example of like you writing for this cigar company. It is so possible that there's something, that we could be writing for organizations that just need a writer. You don't have to know all the content. The material is out there. You can do a Google search and figure out what you need to know, or they'll tell you what you need to be writing about. It's just, you know, bringing your skill as a writer to that is what they're paying you for. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So like in the world of, writing for someone else, let's say your freelancing is work that involves being the voice of someone else, a different company, different service that they're offering. Do you
mhm.
have ideas or tips about that? Because again, you may or may not know a lot about what this company or service provides, but the key is to sound like you do.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about that, especially if you don't feel like it's a natural, like it's going to stretch you a little bit to write in the voice of someone else? We talk about our writing voice a lot, like how to kind of assume a different voice other than your own.
Mm. Yeah, it's a hard skill to learn. It really is. And it is a skill. It's not something that, I mean, maybe some people are just naturally really good at it, but I think it's something that's learnable. And particularly, I think the best way is to actually study what they've already written or what's already out there. Study all the materials that you can that they have produced or put out or have been written, and really try to get a feel for the way in which they are writing things. Try especially to understand their audience's expectations, like who is the audience? What are their expectations? What do they need to know? What is their educational level? Like, at what level are you writing to them?
Mm-hmm.
You need to know a lot about the audience. And I think the best way, really, beyond all of that, beyond like studying what they've already produced and studying their readership, would be to ask, honestly, like, what type of voice do they want to project? Do they want to have a more authoritative voice? Do they want a really friendly voice? Do they want a humorous voice? Do they want you to speak or not speak, but write casually? Or do they want it to be formal? Do they want it to a particular, educational level? Like, is this for folks who have, graduate degrees? You might write differently than you would to maybe if their audience is teenagers. That's going to
Right.
be a completely different voice, right?
Yeah.
I think asking what they're trying to project, what their goal is, how they want it to be presented, is always helpful. And kind of, on the tail end of that, studying what they've already done.
Yeah, that's so good. It's funny too, because I think about, I don't know what's on your social media feeds, but I have teenagers, and one of the things that comes up a lot is like the whole vernacular of teenagers these days and all of the slang words and these parents trying to pick up what the current slang is, and to sound like we know what we're talking about. Like these are, you can find these videos all over the
Oh,
internet.
yes.
That's the point is you like to get some legitimacy in the way you sound, the way you speak, really that translates into our writing too, because you're not going to talk about, you know, rizzing somebody, which is like the
Right.
new word for, being a
Yeah,
suave
totally.
kind of
Yeah.
charismatic person. You
Right.
don't say that to all audiences. So yeah,
Right.
knowing your audience is really, really
Yeah.
key and fun too, because you get to learn some new things behind the scenes for sure.
Mhm.
And then, I think the benefit of all that is that you can translate that into your own writing. Don't you think when you think about who the audience is and how that can translate not only for writing for other people, but writing for your own benefit, for your own platform.
Absolutely. I think it can refine your own voice too, in that if you are practicing writing in a voice that's not your own, you start to know what your own sounds like. Like you can recognize
Right.
the differences of like, no, I wouldn't have written it that way for myself, for my readers, but I know that I'm writing to, like let's say my readership is basically me. I'm a middle-aged woman with on the, just starting empty nesting. I'm talking and writing about menopause, perimenopause, things like that. Well, that voice that will be refined when I start writing for, let's say, baby boomers and their medical, healthcare stuff. That would be a completely different way of talking than to someone my own age about what I'm currently experiencing or whatever. I don't actually write about perimenopause very much, but
But if you
nonetheless,
did.
nonetheless, my point was, I got sidetracked there. That's probably perimenopause. Nonetheless, my point is that it will help refine your own voice when you're working in other spheres, I think. And then you start to know what you sound like and what how you would express something.
Right.
That can be really helpful.
Yeah, and that all goes back to craft, right? That's kind of what we were talking about. Like that, you probably don't even realize at the moment that your craft is improving just
Mhm.
by practice and being able to pick up on some of those, tones of voice, etc.,
Yeah.
in your
Mhm.
writing. So that's really cool. Well, do you have any other tips for somebody who's wanting to look to improve their craft through freelancing? Any other like takeaways that you might offer to somebody who's in it or looking to get into it?
Um, well, my takeaway, I think the takeaway that I would love people to come away with is that you can start right where you are.
Mm,
You don't have to be any better than you are right now. You just have to have a good idea and be willing to take constructive criticism. And
that's
you
good.
also have to be really willing to receive rejection. I mean, it is very common among freelancers, as I have learned and learned personally, to, receive one acceptance for your pitch to like 30 rejections. Like
Mm.
the ratio is absurd. So, but once it just, I kind of look at it like it just shows me that I'm trying. It shows me that I am trying and putting my work out there, and the rejections don't really mean much. They probably mean it doesn't necessarily mean something about you as a writer. It often means that that particular publication didn't need that particular material at this point in time. Maybe they had something recently published about that same topic. Maybe they know their audience won't receive this well, or maybe they want it from maybe they want it from a different perspective, maybe from a male perspective, if you're a female writer. So I kind of look at it that way. Like it's not a personal rejection. It's just not right for them at this point in time. Um,
That's that's a good word. Yeah.
yeah. So I think
To,
those are my main tips just going forward. Like just start where you are and
yeah.
keep going at it. Keep giving it a
Yeah.
shot.
I think that ratio too that you mentioned is helpful for us to keep in mind because what we see published online is the surface of, you know, many writers, many rejections have preceded some
Yeah.
of those wins that we see. And often I think when we look and comparison-itis is a thing, I think we often compare our journeys with someone else's, but we often see someone else accomplishing the things that we're after. And it seems, oh, it's so easy. But if that statistic is anywhere close to true across the board, everyone goes through that rejection and keep getting up and dusting off and trying it again. So
Mhm.
it's a good word to keep in mind. Well, we have some ladies on the call. I want to give you guys an opportunity to unmute, ask any questions of Kimberly. There are any.
Rosemary, you want to go first? We always have questions, don't we?
Yeah, they're good question askers.
Fantastic. I love it.
We're the kids who sit in the front row and have all the questions. Me?
I love
Oh.
it. Please, give me more of those. Yes.
So hi, Kimberly. Thanks for being here. When I was younger, I went the freelance route and I started freelancing for a newspaper and I was querying magazines a lot.
Mhm.
Like you, I am nearing the empty nest stage and am in perimenopause. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, got it.
Well, I'm wondering how you feel that besides the fact that we can send off electronic queries in an instant instead of having to mail them, besides that, how do you feel that the freelancing industry has changed over 30 years? And what advice would you give to someone who wants to break back in?
That's such a good question. Well, I wasn't freelancing that long ago, so it's hard for me to say, but I think what I'm seeing and kind of some of the chatter that I'm hearing, like in the freelance groups that I'm in on Facebook, is that freelancing is actually bigger than ever because a lot of publications have laid off their journalists and their workers. So I think the opportunities are definitely there, even more than they've ever been. However, I'm also hearing that there is a lot of competition because so many writers are out of work, and that maybe they're not paying as much as they used to because there are so many writers who are willing to do it for less. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. I don't know how it would necessarily impact what you're doing in terms of pitching, but those are the trends that I'm kind of hearing about. And I think too, I've certainly seen a lot of places, publications close down. So there are fewer places to write. So I know that paints kind of a dark picture, but I would say that there are a lot of opportunities out there. There's always something new up and coming, a new online magazine, a new online source, a new online like compilation blog where they might pay the people who are like regular writers for them. So I think there are lots of opportunities. It's just a matter of finding the right ones for you.
Is there a really quick turnaround now because it's, constant instant gratification type thing now? Like, yes, we want it. We want it in 3 days, or we want it in a week, or is it things like that?
I think it depends on the publication and how quickly that turnaround is for them. If they're like on a news cycle that's very quick, then it probably would be. If it's something that's more of like a monthly publication that only puts out something every month online or in print, I mean, there's fewer and fewer print things anymore anyway, but then you would have a lot more lead time. I know I write for pretty regularly for an online magazine, and they put new articles on, I want to say every month. But I know 6 months in advance. Like I'm kind of like in their roster now because I freelance for them so often that I'm kind of in their roster. So let's say, over the next 6 months, we want pitches on XYZ, or no, we want articles on XYZ. What are your pitches? And then I have to pitch ideas to them and they choose from that. So I think there's so much variation, but I also think from what I'm seeing and hearing from editors is that there's a very high likelihood you won't hear back if they're not interested in it. So in that sense, it's not quick at all because you could be waiting for a month or 6 weeks or whatever and not hear a thing. And you may never hear a thing because they're just being inundated because it is digital now. I think that the ability for people to pitch and clutter up the email inboxes of editors is much higher than if they had to type something out and put it in a letter and send it via the mail. You have to have a little bit more grit to do that. Now any old person can, fancy themselves a writer and then send off a crazy pitch. So, yeah, I think it might be a fast turnaround depending. I would kind of just see like how are they publishing things? And that probably would indicate how quick that turnaround might be.
I like that idea of the being on their roster and then giving you a topic and then you can pitch about it. I think that would be great if you could do that with the ones that are in your field. And
yes, it's the best work that I do. I feel very lucky to have kind of found that particular path. I don't think that happens very often, quite honestly, but it's been ideal for me because I can pretty much count on if I, pitch 3 to 5 things, they will probably take one and I'll get an article in there every few months. So that's been really nice.
well, thank you.
So you had mentioned the freelance opportunities. Is that actually an online like network or website? Or is
It's,
that just you Google freelance opportunities and you look for it there?
I think someone gave me the link and I cannot remember what it is, but I think if you Google freelance opportunities email list or something along those lines, it should come up for you. It
Okay.
is an email. You have to subscribe.
Okay.
And it comes, do they send it once a week maybe? I can't recall. I mean, I get so many of these things, it's hard for me to remember, but there are lots of, there's so many different places that do send regular emails, and they will be the ones who will scour the internet for you, and
Okay.
find out where those opportunities are. So I think just Googling, I mean, you literally could Google freelance opportunities and you don't even need to land on that particular email list. You'd probably get, a bunch of different things. I think there's also I think there is a subscription only place called Study Hall. And they have an enormous amount of contacts, opportunities, but you have to pay to be in there. So,
Okay.
but I mean, if you're really serious about it, if you really want to start freelancing, I think it would be well worth
Mm-hmm.
a subscription somewhere to know that you have a lot of, stuff at your fingertips that you didn't have to spend time searching for. Yeah.
Sure. And you think that's a better option than, like, I know that I can't remember the name of it, but there used to be this, and I'm sure it still comes out every year, this big book, and it was pretty expensive, of like
Yeah.
all the places that you could publish and write for. I can't remember the name of it now, but
Was it
you think just
Marketplace?
do,
Brand
yeah, something
Marketplace?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to get
Writers
that. I
Market.
used to buy it. Mhm.
Yeah.
And that was
Didn't
where
we
I
all?
started. Yeah, of
Mhm.
course. Yes, we did. Yeah, I want to say I think if you looked up Writers Marketplace, or there was also a Christian version, Christian Writers
Right.
Marketplace. If you look those up, I think they might still do like a digital version. So
Okay.
there might be some things out there. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I mean, you could, again, this is a for Google to take care of for us. So you could Google.
Right.
Sure.
Those answers are out there. I know I've been on a few email lists too of different writers who often curate some lists of places that are looking for pitches. So
Yes.
there's a
Who
lot of those.
I would really recommend following online, particularly on Instagram if you have it. Erica Anderson.
Mhm.
She's in our community.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
I think her Instagram is called Pitch and Publish. I
Yeah.
think it is. She is an absolute wealth of information, and she does send out in her emails. She will, I think, maybe once a month throw a few freelance opportunities in there. And I've learned an enormous amount from her. So in fact, I will just look her up really quickly. Pitch and Publish on
Yeah.
Instagram. And that's Erica Anderson. She is incredibly knowledgeable about freelancing and has some really good tips on how to find freelance work.
Yes,
Okay.
and Carrie and
Okay.
Rosemary, she has a teaching in the archives where
I thought so.
she has a course, and that her teaching is in the archives if you want to look it up. So that
Okay.
was very, very helpful. She really teaches you how to like land your dream bylines.
Yeah, I actually took her course, even though it's her course. It's called Bragworthy Bylines. And even though I feel like a fairly seasoned freelancer, I took the course because I was like, she is so knowledgeable, and she is she just had a lot of connections that, sorry, my dog, I know he's in the background.
No, I love it.
I'm just glad he's not barking. Her course is fantastic, but it is such a deep dive. Like, I would say maybe give it a shot first, doing some freelancing on your own. Let's see what you think, how you feel about it, what kind of questions you're starting to have about it. And then her course might be, you know, for a little, when you're a little further down the road, but actually she has newbies too, take the course as well. But I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's very pricey, but I found it to be worth every penny.
So, do you have like a standard format for doing a pitch, or is it just completely driven by each individual opportunity?
Yeah, I do. I think standardizing it is pretty smart and it works. So I actually have I have an online writer, like a writer's workshop, I call it. It's a digital shop, and I have a product in there. It's very inexpensive digital product on with a template, pitching your work and like how to do it, how to craft a pitch. So there is a template that you can use, and I would suggest doing that. I mean, in whatever form. You could Google one too. I'm not saying go buy it, but sure, I'd love it if you do. But anyway, it's basically, you know, you need to address it directly to the editor, not dear editor. Like, you need to do your homework and find out specifically
who it is.
who is the editor for this particular department in this publication. And then you would very briefly introduce yourself, you know, try to, if possible, make some sort of connection, like a personal connection of like, you know, I've been a reader of your publication for 20 years, something, you know, obviously it has to be true, but whatever that is. And then you would get into your pitch, and you'd open with a hook. You need to have a hook, like something that's going to draw them in and make them wonder, well, you know, what I need to know more about this. And then you would describe what it is you're going to write, how you're going to write it, how many words you anticipate it being, you know, and kind of sell it that way, like craft a mini little proposal in a sense of what that thing is going to be. And then after that, you would have a paragraph on, like a very short paragraph kind of on your, sort of why you're the one who should write this article. You know, if it's something particular to, like I was saying, you know, since I was a nurse at one point for a very short period of time, if I'm writing an article about nursing care today for whatever, nursing care today, I would say, after I pitched the idea, like I worked as a nurse in this particular department for X amount of years, blah, blah, blah. That's why, you know, that explaining why I'm qualified to write about this particular topic. So if it's about, you know, homeschooling, and you were a homeschooler for 30 years, well, that's why, you know, that's why you're an expert at this. So you would put a little bit in there, and then you can put, if you have a couple places where you have written previously, you could add those in there. Like, you know, I've been published at such and such and such and such, or, you know, I write regularly at whatever, this website, or not. You know, you don't have to have a bunch of bylines to get one. That's the beauty of it, is really you could start out having no bylines, but if your idea is great, they're going to take it. If it's great for their audience, they're going to take it. So I would spend the majority of the time on that hook and on that, you know, pitch of like what it is you want to say and how you're going to say it. And make sure it's not too lengthy.
Kimberly, do you,
really,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no worries.
Do you ever write the article and then write the pitch as if you haven't written the article? Or do you, I know it probably depends on the publication. And I know a lot of people, like Erica, would probably say write the pitch first and the article later, because sometimes editors will have a different slant. But if you're feeling a little insecure about, you know, your ability to pull off the article, for example, do you ever recommend that you write the article first and then pitch it, or is that backwards?
I don't know. I don't think I would write it personally. I wouldn't write it personally, just because I think for most of us, we really have to value our time. And if it's not going to go anywhere, like, why would you spend time writing that article? Then again, if you're really not sure yet where you're going with it or how you're going to get there, you can't pitch the idea. So maybe you do want to write it. I think maybe in the very beginning stages of freelancing, maybe it could be helpful. I just kind of would balance that with, like, is this worth my time, or would I be better off pitching a different idea, a different publication with something I know I can blow out of the water because I know this topic so well. So if your pitch isn't fully formed enough yet, that probably means you're not even going to be able to write the article yet,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
kind of where I fall in that. But I mean, listen, if you want to give it a shot, go for it.
Yeah, just a thought, because I think sometimes for me as a writer, I often don't know exactly where I'm going until I get in there. So that can help crystallize the idea in your mind if you have the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be really helpful. And I've done this before, certainly, is having it, like, creating an outline for myself. Like, what are my main points? What story am I going to use to illustrate this? What research might I use to illustrate this? And what is my main conclusion? And I think knowing what you want the reader to take away from it is one of the most helpful things. You don't necessarily need to write the piece to know that. You know, you can determine, no, this is what I want them to walk away with. So an outline in that sense could be really helpful before that would help you craft the pitch.
Yeah.
The dreaded outline.
Yes.
There we go. Back to outlines, right?
Yeah.
I have another question. Kimberly.
Oh,
sorry.
You go.
I went first last time. You go first this time.
Okay. So it's actually kind of a two part question, or maybe it's just two completely separate questions. One, how much of your writing maybe should you give away to begin with,
That's a good
to kind of
question.
break into that?
That is a really tricky one. I think it might be different for each writer to just determine at what point do you feel like this is not serving you as the writer anymore. Because it needs to serve you as well, right? Like, either it's that, or it's just like, it's either you're doing it seriously as a writer, or it's a hobby that you have, and that's great. That's wonderful. It can be a hobby. And in that sense, then it doesn't matter whether you get paid or not. If you just if you're just there to, like, serve people, and that's something you want to do, because you love writing for other people and, like, connecting in that way. Awesome. Great. I think it probably is helpful to determine for yourself, like, to define what do you see as your goal as a writer? Is your goal to make money from it? That does not have to be every writer's goal. So if that's not your goal, then who cares? Write, give it away, do whatever you want to do with it. If that is one of your goals, then yeah, you can determine at what point you feel confident and comfortable enough to say, no, I'm actually going to start to look for places that are going to give me some sort of monetary compensation for this. So I think that will be different for everyone, because it really does depend on where you want to be headed as a writer.
Is it a hobby, or is it a ministry, or is it a profession?
Exactly.
And it can be all three, but
absolutely. Yeah.
We've asked ourselves that question a bunch of times. And on that same thing, I find a lot of, I write for one online devotional, and it's a totally ministry thing, and they link to my own work, so I have the benefit of that. But a lot of the times, the stuff that I'm writing, what I would consider a kind of, it's not really even freelance writing, but it's like letters for people that don't know how to communicate whatever it is. And I mean, again, that's mostly been ministry related. And I just accept that. But how do we, I don't even think about, like, putting that on a resume, for example, but it's something that I've done a lot of. so how do you kind of like account for that in your, I guess, writing resume is, you know?
Yeah. I think in terms of like, well, let me think that through for a second. Certainly, if you're writing for an organization, such as a church or what have you, whether you're compensated or not, like if that's irrelevant. You have written for this organization. That is something you could absolutely put on your, your writing resume, or, you could say, I write regularly for such and such church or organization, ministry, whatever it is. And that absolutely counts. I think it's a little trickier if you're thinking like individually, if you're helping individuals to communicate in a certain way, unless they are maybe presenting something, like you're helping them write a speech, you're helping them write a sermon, you're helping them write, I think it'd be hard to, I'd find it hard to really place that on a resume. I think maybe that's just like, it built your skill set.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, I kind of had a consulting business for a while, and that was kind of, I mean, mostly the writing that I did for that was stuff I did for free for people, but there was still that component of it. So I don't know, I could add that in there, but even just listening to you, I'm thinking about all the different writing I've done for the, many years that I, worked in education and, all that. And, yeah, I don't even think about putting that like on and in my mind, I'm thinking resume, but whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
So,
yeah, kind of your author bio.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
certainly seems like skill set too. Like, you've learned how to write in somebody else's voice in a way, right? So it's definitely a skill you've gained.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up on time here. Do you want to take one more question, or do you need to go?
Oh, no, I'd love to. Sure.
Okay. I understand from your little bio at the beginning that you decided not to publish a book. Is that correct?
Well, that was decided for me.
Okay.
Publishers.
Okay.
But, so I could have self-published, and I chose not to do that. Yeah, so I have pitched many a book proposal, and there was a period of a number of years where I was working with a literary agent, and it just became really clear that was just not going to happen for me. It just was not. So I could have self-published. I might still at some point, I don't know. But I think it really tripped me up for a really long time. When I look back and I think all of that mental and emotional energy and even writing time that I spent on something that was literally going nowhere, and when I knew it was going nowhere, I could have spent that energy on something beautiful. I could have spent it on other writing work that would have been life-giving to me. And, like I look back on that time and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had recognized sooner that I could have been doing other life-giving work, at least at the same time, or not just like I threw all my eggs in one basket, I think is really what I'm getting at. And that was, and I kind of regret that a little bit. But still, would I love to write books? Absolutely. Of course. I mean, what writer doesn't want to? It's awesome. It's a great idea. But I wish I hadn't gotten so tripped up on it.
I understand. That was kind of me with my fiction for a while. And then I just decided to set it aside and work on nonfiction. But my question was actually related to the idea that someone posed to me recently that writers who have a book coming out help to create their platform by writing articles on their topic.
Sure, yeah.
So in addition to writing on your own Substack or your Instagram or whatever, to actually try to get articles in different publications so that your readers are like, oh, this is interesting. She has something to say on this subject. And oh, look, her book is coming out in February, which is my situation. I have a book coming out in February. So poor Kara, she hears about it on every
I love it.
But my questions always relate to that. So knowing that you don't have a book, so I know that's not your particular sphere, but what do you feel about, like, what input can you give me on that whole subject? Because when I think of that idea, I'm like, oh, good idea. And then I don't even really know where to start. Do you see a lot of articles like that in the publications that you're following, where someone is talking about a subject and then, oh, down at the bottom, look, they have a book about that? Like,
Yeah.
is that a big thing? And what input do you have about that idea?
Yes, 100%. I see it all the time. Almost, I mean, goodness, yes. I have a lot of friends. Obviously, we all have a lot of writer friends because we're writers. But I have a lot of friends who have written books. So I have seen them go through this process. And it really is, I mean, it's really, I think, necessary. It's really necessary. You need to get as much of the word out there as you can, because the publisher's not going to do a lot of it for you. So what I see now is a lot of authors going on podcasts, trying to get on as many podcasts as you can, pitching yourself and your topic for podcasts. That seems to be a really fruitful, I think, way of doing it. And also it's easier sometimes to talk rather than write out something new if you've been writing all this time. But I definitely see at, at various publications, so often their byline at the bottom will say they have a new book out or it's coming out in 6 months or whatever. So, if you have any material that you had written with the book that didn't go in the book, I would repurpose all of that material as articles, pitch it as articles, pitch aspects of your particular topic. It doesn't need to be something that, I mean, you don't want to give away the content of your book, right? So it really, if you can brainstorm as many topic adjacent ideas that you can and begin pitching those to various publications where you think that audience, I mean, you need to, hopefully, I'm assuming you know who your audience is. Well, where are they reading? Where else are they reading? What other publications are they reading? Go there and pitch your ideas there. That way, because if you're going to write for a publication where those folks are never going to want to read about the topic or buy the book, then that's pointless work for you. You want to go where your readers are. So it might even be worth polling your readers if you can, if you have access to them through an email, their email address, or if you're like on social media or whatever, just find out, where are they reading now? What publications are they hanging out at? Where do they like to hear, what voices are they listening to? I would look for other authors who are writing kind of in the same area as you, kind of the same niche topic wise. Where do you see them publishing articles? If you see them publish, go to their websites. Lots of times, usually, you can find, they'll have on their website, a tab that says articles and their other work, and you can go see, well, where have they been writing? They probably have the same type of readership as I do. Where have they been? But so I think those are some options for you, hopefully.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. Thank you.
Sure.
It reminds me, Kimberly, we had a book workshopping class last week, and Liz Morrow, Rosemary, you were on that call. She had just had a book come out, and she said, now I need to be able to talk about this topic for the next several years. And so that's kind of like the same idea, is that once you've written a book, you're going to have to talk about it for a real long time. And
even fiction authors do. Sometimes they have to go back to
Yeah.
the first book in their series and talk about it again, and have to go back and remember that. And
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well,
Well,
congratulations.
Kimberly, how can we keep up with you and follow your work?
Well, thanks for asking. Well, I'm on Instagram. I'm Kimberly A. Coyle on Instagram. I write on Substack at The Attentive Life. So I'm on there. And I do have a website. It's KimberlyAnnCoyle.com. And on there, I have my writer's workshop. So I have some products in there for writers. I just created a digital product called How to Create a Writer's Rule of Life. So kind of figuring out like, where am I headed as a writer? I need a rule of life for that. I need to partner with God and figure out like, where am I headed? And then, the stuff on pitching, I have a product for that as well. So some good resources on there.
That's wonderful. I will be sure to link those things in our show notes when this podcast comes out. So we appreciate you being here, talking to us about all things freelancing and pitching. And we've talked about a lot of things. So
we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, we loved having you. It was fun to talk about these topics. So thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you all.
And thanks again, Kimberly. Have a great day.
Sarah,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.